Well, good morning and good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are today. We're happy to have you join us. We've got a great presentation lined up. And I just noticed we had a lot of attendees, so we're really excited about that. We're going to be talking about optimizing portfolio planning and execution in asset-intensive industries over the next 45 minutes or so. My name's Guy Barlow. I'll be moderating today's discussion. I'm a sales advisor with VPO, which, as you'll see, is one of the presenters today. So again, we're looking really forward to the next 45 minutes. A couple of housekeeping tips or things that we need to keep in mind. Everybody's going to be on mute, okay, until we're done. The way you can communicate with us, the way you can ask questions, and we certainly hope you will, is through the Q&A function in the Zoom meeting, okay? So go ahead and do that. If you have any questions, please enter them there. I will be monitoring them, obviously, when I'm not presenting. And then at the tail end, we're going to do a short question and answer. So I'm really hoping to see a lot of good questions that we can address. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on. So I'm really honored to have two great speakers here today. Two folks that I've known for a number of years. We have a common thread running through our background, and that's Primavera. First speaker up today will be Christy Tan-Nekowitz. She's the president of Envision. Christy will be handling that portfolio side of things as it relates to capital planning. Christy's claim to fame, well, among many other things, she's a wonderful person, is employee number 5 at Primavera. Can you believe that? I think I was employee 500, Christy. So it's great to see that familiar Primavera background. Laura Nee will be following in Christy's footsteps, so to speak. She's the creator and CEO of VPO, more on the execution side of those projects. And she also has that claim to fame, but it is actually as the first reseller of Primavera back in the mid-1980s. So some great experience on the call today, and I'm excited to be a part of this. So before we get into the actual presentation, I've just got a handful of slides that I wanted to cover off, kind of to set the stage, if you will. Basically, as we know, we're struggling a little bit with projects and delivering them on time, delivering them on budget. This is something that has been a challenge probably since day one, to be honest. The trouble is it really matters in this industry for a number of reasons, but most notably, we've got a lot of zeros associated with our projects, right? Hundreds of millions, billions of dollars for oil and gas, utilities, wastewater projects. So there's a high level of scrutiny and expectation on these projects. So we are still challenged, but as I like to say, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I just want to talk about a couple of those challenges. We'll talk about some of the benefits in the next slide. So what are some of those challenges? A lot of it comes back to manual processes, clunky technology, a lot of homegrown applications, certainly consumer-based applications as well that really aren't purpose-fit or purpose-built for managing these large-scale projects. And what that really does is it limits our visibility and transparency across those portfolios. And again, these are complex, multi-years, a lot of moving parts. We have to have that visibility and transparency. The outcome of that is risks. Some of those risks we've already mentioned, right? Cost overruns, delays, reputational risks, litigation. There's a whole host of things that can really blindside us, impact us in ways that we may not be able to see just because simply we don't have that visibility and that transparency. However, as we digitize the industry, as we move into a more digital world, there are a lot of benefits associated with moving into this digital realm. Christy, if you could advance the slide, thank you. So increased productivity, faster decisions, accountability, those all come through the advent of technology, right? And the use of this technology. And at the end of the day, we're still going to have things that come up that aren't optimal in projects, but the key is getting visibility, a heads up, a line of sight of those before they actually happen. And that just gives us a greater confidence in our ability to make decisions moving forward on these projects. Again, really important for industries like oil and gas, utilities, wastewater, again, just because of the sheer complexity and impact these have on society. Next slide, thank you. So like any good presentation, we have our 7 steps, our model, right? This is really the flow of the presentation today. The top part there you'll see is mostly around that portfolio planning, and Christy's going to handle that coming up in just a few seconds. And then at the tail end, Laura's going to pick up the execution part of it. Now, admittedly, some of these things blend into each other a bit, but by and large, you can divide it into the portfolio planning, the project execution, and then obviously the reporting out, which impacts both portfolios and projects. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to strive to paint a picture, create a vision for folks like yourself that through digital transformation, the digitization of the industry, we can make those better decisions around those portfolios. We can execute more successfully as we move into a lot of these large scale projects. So with that, I'm going to stop. I'm going to hand it over to Christy, and I'll jump back in for the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Thanks again.
Thank you, Guy. Hi, everyone. This is Christy Tan-Nekowitz. I'm really excited to be here with Laura and Guy. It feels like we're having an old Primavera alumni party here. I won't talk about our Primavera days, but I do want to talk about project portfolio management. As the funnel showed, from Guy, I can talk about that funnel all day. But what I want to talk about today specifically, though, is the extra layer of challenges that asset-intensive organizations have when they manage their programs and portfolios. So a lot of the tools that you see out there will help you manage that funnel. But what if you're an asset-intensive organization? You have this extra layer of needs that's primarily wrapped around long-range planning. Because you have assets that need to be repaired, renewed, replaced, and you have these ongoing operations to manage those, or operate the assets, you have a lot of possibly known costs with a lot of history year over year. But then you also have, like other organizations, whether they be engineering, construction, or professional services organizations, you have these projects that are proposed that you hope to get, you hope to start, and there are a lot of project requests. The idea is then you want to capture all of that and then apply, those are the demand on your funding, your capital, and your people. And you have to overlay that on top of your annual budget constraints, because we all have upper limits on how much money we can spend, maybe a cash flow constraint, maybe resource constraints. So we need to collect both the demand and the supply side of the equation for our asset-intensive organization. And then there isn't just one right answer for choosing what the program should look like or what your portfolio should look like for the next 5 years. There are multiple scenarios. How do we choose the best one? So that's when we have to look at the prioritization of all of the project requests and the annual projects and annual operational costs that we have to consider. And we have to make sure that we are picking the ones that are aligned with our strategy. We have strategic drivers we have regulatory constraints. We may have life cycle costs that we're trying to reduce. We're trying to minimize our execution risk so that we don't want to delay some projects that may cause us more problems at the end. So there are all kinds of considerations, and different scenarios could be created, and you want to be able to compare them. And then when you choose a scenario, and that's the one that you want to approve for your long range plan that you're going to be presenting to the board or to your clients, you want to make sure that you can articulate why that was the best decision and how it aligns with your strategy, and you can defend your data-driven decisions. You also want to be able to look at dashboards and reports that will forecast your capital needs, your work volume. So these are all different things that layer on top of just your typical project portfolio management task for like an engineering and construction company. So it's a little more intense than that for an asset-intensive organization. So some of these steps are basically easily achieved with a modern solution, that can replace your legacy databases, your manual spreadsheets, and those labor-intensive processes for doing those things that I just mentioned in the previous slide. So what you want to do is have a modern solution, digitize this, collect the relevant data, whether it's from other enterprise systems or in institutional knowledge in people's heads. You want to capture that and then meld that together to create a model for scenario planning, create separate scenarios, optimize the different scenarios so that you can take a look at it from the perspective of your budget or schedule or safety, regulatory compliance, et cetera. So I'm only going to talk about the first part of the funnel, as Guy said, and then Laura's going to finish at the bottom part of the funnel. So to start with, we want to be able to capture information from finance and accounting. Things like maybe there's a budget, you may have Hyperion or SAP Oracle doing your financial accounting. You have some of that planning in there. You don't want to have to do double data entry. So we want to grab it from there. Line of business may have asset management, work order management systems. They may have their own databases that you can track. And then you may have some, for example, like a Primavera master schedule or a bunch of Microsoft project schedules. Information is everywhere already in your organization, and you want a way to capture them, but not just as silos. You want to be able to connect them together that makes sense. So whether it's work orders or projects and contracts or departmental data or financial data, you need to have a way to meld them together so that they make sense. So almost like a Rubik's Cube, when you turn one side, the other side changes. And that is one easy way for you to then look at all of this holistic information of your portfolio so that you can create roadmaps. So the first thing you might want to do, and I'll just show a couple of examples here, you may want the ability to import from either a specified source or using maybe you have spreadsheets or information from another database that you can import. It could be a summary level or detailed spending and even like transaction details to look at the past, how many hours you typically spend and how many resource roles typically spend on water main breaks or different types of operations and repair projects. Once you've collected the information from the enterprise systems, even if it's not a file exchange, it could be like a web services API integration, if your IT folks allow access to those. You can collect the data that's already there without duplicate data entry. And then for data that's not there, that's non-existent, you want to have a consistent form to collect the business cases or justifications so that you can consider all of the requests for your supply, side by side. Let me just show you a little demonstration for what a form like that might look like. For example, you could go to an area where everybody is entering their project requests. And for an asset-intensive organization, it's not just new projects, but it could be existing projects and we just need more money. So there could be additional budget requests, for example. And we typically can see a workflow that from request all the way through approval. And we have this little nice color coding to show us where we are in the process and how many of those requests have already been approved. So to enter a new project request, to collect that information that's in institutional knowledge, maybe you want to add a request. Maybe I'm just going to put in some bogus numbers here. There could be intelligence built in that helps us know which department that's in based on the account number or not. It's totally up to you. And I'm going to just quickly add a project that maybe I have some justification for. The form, to be consistent, you can have basically fields that you need people to, mandatory fields that you need people to put in, maybe certain drop downs, values that you want them to input without messing up your database. So we can put in some information, key information. about our project. And in this case, I'm just going to say, I need a lot of money for this project. And I'm going to pick someone who requested it, and the project manager. I'll say Laura's the project manager, and put in some purpose and justification for whoever is reviewing my request. Hopefully my spelling is okay. Attach any documents, design documents, or maybe feasibility study documents or asset management plan, whatever it is you have, and then submit the request. It basically comes up with a template email that's going to be sent to somebody who might be able to approve it. And I'll just say, depending on who I want to send this to, I'm going to send it to my capital program owner and create and send the email. So you have everybody in the organization go through this process. You collect all of the requests. So for example, this is, now it shows me that I'm in this stage of my request. So you collect all the requests and you're ready to do your prioritization. So one way you can look at the request is using some sort of a drill down dashboard. In this case, I'm looking at all the requests as they were submitted. I can look at it by purpose. Let me click on that. And it's showing me, all of the different types of purpose codes that I've set up. Maybe by priority. I have A1, A2, etc. I can sort by the budget, size of the budget. So maybe the highest one, the biggest in-flight projects are up front, followed by smaller projects. I can look at only specific projects. Maybe I only want to look at the regulatory compliance projects. Okay, I have a couple here, a few here. So here's how you could drill down, take a look at everything that's been submitted. But now I want to do some analysis and create some scenarios, because I know that I'm not going to be able to approve all of them unless you're very lucky. You don't have unlimited budget that can approve all projects. So I want to go to this like spreadsheet view, more or less, that allows me to pivot different information so that I can take a look at my projects that have been proposed, or some of them are, I know I have to set aside money. For example, if I'm a water utility, I know I'm going to have some unscheduled main breaks that I'm going to need to budget for. So these are all like highest priority. They have actual failure, for example. I might want to pivot my information by purpose. Let's do that. So now I can see for the different purposes, let me do them in descending order. So maybe I see the safety purposes first, and improve technology, regulatory compliance, etc. I can also see, for example, that I have some relationships between my projects or budget requests. I have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 here, and they are related. And I can tell already based on when the required date and when the current proposed dates are, that I might miss some regulatory deadlines, and that's highlighted in red. I can also see that based on the request here. Let me scroll over. You'll see that I have by year, I can show it by month, but by year I have this red, yellow, and green indicator that tells me that I'm going to exceed my budget, or by a lot or a little, that's the red and the yellow, or I have some money left over. So based on this picture, I know I'm going to have to move my approvals around. My multi-year plan is going to include some projects that I approve right now, and then some projects that I'm going to have to delay. But when I delay my projects, some of the projects, I want to make sure that they don't have negative impact on the overall portfolio. So what do we do typically? Let me move this Teams thing here and show you some of the things that you might do typically. You may say, okay, the justification for this water quality control, it's actually not a regulatory compliance issue. It was just something that, we wanted to do for new growth, or for, something that has reached the end of its expected life, and we need to do some more work on this quality control facility. And as I change my justification here or my purpose, if I change the purpose of this to some, instead of going regulatory compliance, if I change it to a different purpose, I'll get a different score for that purpose value. Or if I change the priority, instead of in flight, I change it to A1, it changes my priority score from a 10 to a 7 and so forth. So all of these are customizable like a formula in Excel, so you don't have to do it in Excel anymore. The formulas will recalculate as you change your coding, the priority, the risk, and then you can then take a look at everything in a holistic format and apply your constraints on top, like your budget constraint, and then have a scenario created for you. Instead of changing it one at a time, I can also go to a bunch of different projects and say, for these projects, I'm going to change their purpose code to, something else that I know is more accurate. And it changes their priority numbers, their priority score, etc. So now what I'd like to do is show you how we can automatically create a scenario for you. So I'm going to level portfolio, and I'm going to just create a 5-year plan or 10 years if we want to. It doesn't matter for our demo. And I can level on a bunch of different information, from my different enterprise systems. I can level based on gross capital expenditures. I can level based on quantity, whether that's, square foot, linear foot, whatever it is you track. I can also level on resources, resource people, people limits. So for this example, I'm just going to base it on my total gross expenditures and just stick with my constraints that I already have, which is something like, 120 million a year. And I'm going to say, okay. You'll notice the red, yellow, and green indicators will go away after leveling is done. And that only took a few seconds. And now everything is green. And I may have extended in order to do all of these projects that everybody wanted, it's going to take more than 5 years. It's going to go into my 6th year for some of them. So now that we've done all the different, I can save that as a scenario. And now we're ready to compare scenarios. So let me just take a look at this dashboard that compares 3 different scenarios that I may have created quickly, by changing my priority, re-level. So the original request may look something like this. Everybody wants their projects in year 1. That's why year 1 is higher than subsequent years. But once I leveled it, look how nice and straight that is based on my budget constraint. I can now slice and dice this information based on a lot of different categories of information I have. So for example, I may want to look at how this impacts central region. So I'll click on central and it will redraw the slide. It looks like originally they requested over $30 million in year 1, and then their request kind of dropped down. In the scenarios that we created, year 1, they'll get 20 million, and then they get a lot in year 2. And you can see it in scenario B, they actually get a little less. So if I'm from the central region, I'm going to like scenario A better. Right. And again, you can look at it differently. You can look at another region like Eastern and see that it actually makes very little difference after we level our portfolio, what kind of funding they get, because maybe they have mainly repairs and things and renewal projects that we have to approve in the timing that they asked for. So those are just some of the drill downs that you can see. You can also look at how, when you selected a scenario, how that is aligned with your corporate strategy or your objectives, strategic objectives. So we can see that the biggest block of our budget is going to be spent to renew assets in poor condition. The second biggest block is here, maybe improve technology or cybersecurity. And then the third and fourth and fifth block, you can also see in terms of a pie chart or any of that information and group and sort how your projects look if you like. So slicing and dicing so that you can understand what the scenarios are telling you, so that you can defend these decisions, is just the type of things that you'll need for portfolio management. Now, with that, I am going to pass the torch over to Laura. Laura, are you there?
Thanks, Chrissy. Yeah, I'm here. I just had to click on my buttons.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Christy. What Christy has gone through is, the upfront planning that goes into an asset-intensive organization to decide what projects you're going to take on in the next 1 to 5 to 10 years. And so with VPO, it takes over the management of the projects. Once you've decided which projects you're going to be doing, then you can manage the execution phase of the projects in VPO. So if you could go to the next screen. So along the same lines, as far as, now that you've identified what projects you're going to be working on, now how do you manage them? And really that turns into your capital program management or portfolio management system that enables you to manage all phases of the project from initiation, planning, execution, and closeout. And in my opinion, you can set yourself up for success by tracking, implementing tracking tools that will help enable you to make sure, are you on track with schedule? Are you on track with budget? And is everything moving the way that you need to from a review and approval perspective? You can go to the next slide. So from my perspective, the steps for digital transformation are, if you can just click, Christy. You're really going to want to implement a secure permissions-based environment for all of the key team members to utilize one centralized system that the owner, the designers, the consultants, engineers, contractors, vendors, and suppliers all have access to, so that you can manage and streamline the information that's coming in and being shared on your projects. It's going to help you improve productivity in a real-time collaborative environment for managing your documents, because you're not going to be emailing documents back and forth. You're going to dictate that a formal electronic review and approval process is established, so that not only can you make sure that that process is streamlined, but also make sure that it's all documented and visible and transparent, so that 5 years after the project's complete, you have all of your documentation in a single location. If you just want to click one more time. So the other, word of caution is that a lot of our customers, before using, something like VPO, accepted information via email, and that's the natural sharing or exchange of information, right? But what the problem with that is that then the information is in disparate formats and in different systems. And, unfortunately, when you have a claim or dispute, there's not necessarily one location where you can go to get all of the project information. So we really want to limit acceptance of email for key documentation of project information. It is inevitable. There will be information that comes in via email. The important thing is to then capture that as well, alongside all of your other project documentation. You can go to the next slide. So with VPO, we give you the opportunity at the project level to track all of the information that you see on screen here, from your drawings and specifications, making sure that the contractors, vendors, and suppliers are building to the right specifications, RFIs, submittals, making sure that the review of questions and answers are done in a timely fashion, and the submittals are processed timely as well. Schedule information, action, making sure that everybody is working to the latest schedule and is abreast of the schedule, and constantly monitoring the schedule and making sure that you're going to complete on time, and if not, being able to recover before the end of the project. The sooner that you can notice that you're behind schedule, the sooner you have an opportunity to recover and get back on track. Action items, making sure that people have information as to what you expect them to follow up on, issues, being able to track issues, harmful things that could happen to your project so that you have it all documented and a control plan. Daily reports, safety reports, things that are going on daily on your projects, having a centralized system to track all that information, as well as punch lists. Progress reports are very important to keep key stakeholders abreast of the progress being made on the project. And then certainly, as Christy was looking at the budget at the portfolio level, you also want to be able to manage the budget at the project level to make sure that you have that you're on budget, that you have your contracts in place, your purchase orders, and then when change orders occur, how that affects your project and making sure that you still are on budget, or if you need to go back for further funding. And certainly collecting payment applications and invoices. And again, project email is going to be inevitable, but if you can have a way to track it electronically alongside your project documentation and files, you will be set up for success. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then just show you real time what VPO looks like. So as Christy went through her part of the demonstration, she was focused on, above any one portfolio level, where you start with, I have to pick which screen here, hold on. Okay. Where VPO takes over is that you're able to manage your portfolio of projects that are your approved projects list. So we don't try to overlap on information. A lot of the portfolio planning that you do as an organization is going to be done in the Envision system. And then once you've agreed that these are the projects that we're going to take and that are going to need to be underway, then those belong into VPO. We provide our clients a portfolio view so that you can look at all the projects that your organization has decided to take on. And then we have also dashboard reporting as well, but it's more on the execution process of the projects. What projects do we have? What are their budgets? What phase are they in? Or what types of projects they are. So we're able to provide dashboard reports at the portfolio level so that you can start grouping project information together. And there's a lot of different reports that you can look at the portfolio level. You have your executive dashboard report, you have your budget by phase, but you also have other types of reports like a Gantt chart report of all the projects that are underway. So here I might be looking at specific projects, but I want to look at the Gantt chart of projects and see where they are as far as schedule is concerned. So VPO, again, is focused on the execution phase of the projects. Now, when we go into an actual project, let me just walk you through kind of how the project site works. First of all, the first tip was to get all of the team members involved with the project. So we set up a secure project site that you can invite members of your team to, even people outside of your organization. And I think that owner organizations, asset intensive organizations tend to not encourage that on the project. And you really are better off if you can have and sort of plug and play the different people that do work for your projects, whether those are engineering firms, whether those are vendors, suppliers, OEMs, having everybody plugged into your system as an owner so that you can have the same processes from project to project to project. You'll just have different people on different projects. It behooves you to own that data because if there is ever a claim or dispute, everything's in your system. You have full access to that information, and you're simply inviting different participants at the project level. So at the project level, we have all of the team who has access to this, but of course you have to make sure that it's secure information, and not everybody has the same level of rights in a collaborative system. You have a homepage, certainly, that can enable your audience of the project, whether that's stakeholders or team members, being able to see, how many RFIs and submittals do you have, progress photos on the project, keeping abreast of, key resources on your project, quick access to areas that you work with or news items on the project. And something that's simple but very telling is where the project exists, right? So that if you have people in different time zones that you're working with that are building equipment for you over in Italy, they can see your time zone as well. Now with VPO, again, we're at the project execution side. So the first thing that typically you want to have is a centralized address book for all the contacts that do work on your project. So this is your list of key team members, most of which will be ultimately invited to join you and collaborate with you on VPO. But again, you can establish what security group each party belongs to, and each security group gives you specific information on the left-hand side to what you want people to be able to have access to. Some people will have the ability to add information. Some people will be able to just add information but never delete information off of your site. Some people will have read-only information. A lot of times executives or people that you just want to share the information with, but don't want people to change the information. So the information on the left-hand side just kind of shares some of the documentation that you would have access to as well. So this is a default template, but we also work with customers to customize how they want to best organize files on their projects so that every project looks and feels the same way. And the information is, navigating to the same information. Certainly drawings and specs is important on a project. So you want to make sure that you're able to pull out the drawings in various different phases as they're being issued. And our issuance module keeps track of, drawing packages that have been issued for the project, whether they're in the design phase or the construction phase or bidding phase of the project. And then schedule is really important. So, you might have a master schedule of your own, or you may be managing a contractor schedule that's being submitted to you via submittal. But either way, making sure that people are aware exactly where you stand on the project and having that information available to people so that they can see exactly what's going on from a timeline perspective. And as Christy said, it's as important as it is at the portfolio level to make sure that you continue to be on track from a budget perspective. You need to do exactly the same at the project level. So you want to establish and break down the budget categories and put an original budget amount, because all the other columns in this view are being calculated from different areas within VPO. So we have a lot of different modules that contribute to the management of costs on your project. We have contracts. These are the contracts that you actually are issuing out for the different team members that you're working with, and each have a specific contract value. And then we're going to be tracking change orders as they come in. How do those affect the original contract amount, making sure that you have enough money and funding for the project. And then processing contractors' applications for payment and vendors' invoices against the project so that we can get that holistic view of what's been paid out to date, where are our variances, and making sure that you keep on track all along the way of the project. Something that's very simple, good to track and manage electronically are all the review and approval items or workflows on a project. So RFIs and submittals are simply things that are being submitted usually by a contractor or vendor supplier who's working on your project that needs clarification. So RFIs enable you to have one central location that all the questions and answers are asked and formalized so that you have a true audit trail of anybody who's touched anything about that particular record. So audit trail in a collaborative system is a necessity. And, oftentimes this is something that you can turn over to a legal team if there's ever an issue on your project, so that you can make sure that you can see exactly what happened in what sequence and any discussion items that were made between the various different parties involved with your project. So having access to all that information, all the attachments that would be along with that, And then even having a printable transmittal for if you need to, ever print out any of this information, having that accessible, and also part of your audit trail for the end of the project through your archive. So the nice thing about these workflows is that they all work together, but really what they provide at the end of the day is a centralized list that's searchable so that you can see, across your project or even on this one particular log, what information is being tracked for valves, and then being able to pull that up. Or better yet, at the home level, you can search your entire project for documentation about, something that may have happened that you're looking for on your project, whether it's a drawing, a specification, an email. You're able to track and manage everything once it's in a centralized location. And then, we talked about daily reports, making sure that you're capturing information that's being done on a daily basis, also from an audit trail perspective, so that you have day by day timestamp of like what's actually occurred on the project today, who, what manpower was on site, equipment that was delivered, visitors to the site, and some nice photos of progress that have been made on the project for, superintendents to be able to share, especially for people who aren't located at the project specifically. So, and there's also, just a nice project summary that you can keep track of high-level milestones for the project as to whether you're on schedule or behind schedule in certain areas. And we call this kind of a one-page status report that enables you to see a list of all the activities, the open items that you're managing, and have quick snapshot of the budget as it stands today on your project. So this was just meant to kind of give you a flavor of, how can you run a digital platform that's available to all of your stakeholders so that you can do, detailed reporting at the project and the portfolio level for all of the projects that have been approved within your organization. So having said that, what we're going to do, Guy and Christy, if you guys want to come back on, we just wanted to kind of go through some Q&A. And if anybody in the audience wants to ask any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function within Zoom to ask your questions, and we'll address them as we go.
Yeah, there were actually, Laura, there were a few questions that came in. Funny enough, there were a group of them that I could cluster into specific questions for both you and Christy. So it was actually very convenient. I thank the people attending for making my job a little bit easier today. It's always helpful. So I guess I'll start at the top of the funnel with Christy. And this is, again, sort of a consolidation of questions. I wrote these down as they came in. It sounds like a lot of people, Christy, as you would expect, are working in Excel, right? That's sort of the historical thing. How hard is it to make that transition from Excel to something like Envision? Is it hard getting all that data in there and being able to get off and running pretty quickly? That's how I interpreted these handful of questions.
So actually that is true. We see a lot of Excel is the biggest competitor to any modern solution. Everybody keeps lists in Excel, and everybody has their own offline disjointed spreadsheets. And it's hard to hold people accountable, right? And when they have their own spreadsheets, because if you want to talk to them about a status of something and they say, oh no, that's been changed, I have this other spreadsheet that shows that it's been changed. It's really hard for accountability if you don't have a central system. But they do think that it's very difficult. Oh, it's impossible to combine all of our spreadsheets into one or make sense of them. My spreadsheet is at this high level of detail, but his spreadsheet is at this lower level of detail. How can we talk to each other? So I think that is a common misconception that it's hard to do, but we certainly try to solve that problem for our clients by letting them choose what level of detail they want to see and make it very easy to import the Excel spreadsheets, rename the columns, and then present them with a user interface that seems like Excel, like pivot tables, like the ability to edit and add and so forth, so that they become very comfortable very quickly. So yes, making that process quick and easy is what we do. Otherwise, nobody would ever move from Excel to like.
I know adoption of new technologies often falters because there's too much of a change in behavior, right? So it's good to see that there's some consistency there, which I think people appreciate.
Right.
Yeah, and also I'm going to sneak in a question for you, Christy. Just steal a couple of seconds here. I hear that you recently got a patent for Envision. Is that the case?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. Actually, I forgot to mention that earlier. We did just this month got a patent. Our patent application was submitted like 5 years ago. The way we import data and the way we summarize dependencies to your specified level of detail. That's actually a patented algorithm that we have. And we finally got approved this month. So I'm really happy about that. Thank you for mentioning.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
5 years.
I know.
Better get that next one in quickly. Laura, so again, similarly and kind of oddly, some questions that kind of cluster around this theme of, I guess, what you would call flexibility, configurability, customization, or some words that come to mind. You know, VPO, adaptable, configurable for other, you know, companies, you know, for their unique needs, workflows, business processes. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, with VPO, we try to give our customers a starting point as to what's, you know, typical in an engineering construction type project. But our kind of claim to fame is to be able to take our clients' requirements and build a system around their requirements, as opposed to force them into an off-the-shelf system that's set up in such a way. So it's kind of a good combination of both. It enables you to have a starting point, so you're not building the system from scratch. But we've found that asset-intensive organizations have a lot of different requirements. So once they understand the platform and what the power is behind VPO, they have a lot of other processes that they want to also automate and digitize. And so we're able to take those manual processes and make them electronic just as well, even if they're even outside of engineering construction. Sometimes we've gotten, you know, other types of processes that just require review and approval, and we can use our platform to enable any of them to be handled electronically.
Excellent. Oh, excellent. I think that answered that question. In the interest of time, the remaining questions we'll get back to folks on a one-on-one basis, but I thought these three here were pretty interesting. And Laura, why don't we start with you? You know, what have you seen over the last 5 years? I mean, as I view the industry, the construction technology space has exploded. Digitization continues to, you know, be adopted in the industry. But from your personal experience, what have you seen in the last few years?
I think that people heavily relied on email to share information back and forth on the projects. And I see a lot more interest from an owner's perspective that they build out a system for their team members to collaborate and document in their system that they own. And I also, along those same lines, you know, having worked with companies like manufacturing organizations, the document management is so collaborative now. It's no longer, you know, here's my PDF static document or design drawing and, you know, mark it up. They're actually working together to almost design and build the design of the plant or facility. And so that's why document management is so critical, and having tools that will easily track who said what when from an audit trail perspective, and also just being able to share a single document without having to transfer it back and forth from party to party. It's centralized in the system, and people can just simply make changes real time online.
Right. Yeah, that all makes sense. And Christy, what about your thoughts? Maybe a little bit different from a portfolio perspective, although I'm sure fairly consistent as well.
You're on mute, Christy.
Come on, we want to hear you talk, Christy.
I like what Laura said. You know, I think it's true. A lot of the dependency on email and everything and is going away, and the collaboration. I mean, my team and I, we are in collaboration tools all day, you know, developing and designing as we go. So I like that a lot. Another trend that we see is really people's concept of outsourcing IT and it has moved from like, in the past it was like, oh, well, let's ease up the workload for our IT people because they're really busy and overbooked, to cybersecurity. This is really important. And now everybody is more educated about what it takes for a hosted platform for solutions like Laura's and mine. So I see a lot more like, I would say, consumer education on that. They understand that a lot better. And they are definitely keying in on what can you do for me to help me, be more secure and everything. And whether it's my portfolio data, my budget data, or even communication. How do I communicate and push out all this information without impacting, my security?
Right.
Lots of other trends, but yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Along those same lines, like the companies that we're working with today, the security is even inside the project. So there are multiple almost competitors on a single project that each uniquely have proprietary information that's being submitted on the project. So we actually have to go down to the item level security because they're all in the same system, but certain people only have access to certain items, even within a submittal module or an RFI module, and that security is critical in that you want the advantage of everyone being in the same platform, but you have to also make sure that it's secure. And we actually administer the security for our clients. So we take on that responsibility, which alleviates the concern from the client mistakenly sharing something they didn't mean to.
Right. Big issue. Christy, just why don't we start with you? We mentioned actually at the top around Excel spreadsheets, getting them into, Envision, getting people up and running. I think it ties in nicely with this question. And maybe it's a similar question. What are some of those hurdles, I guess, to adoption for the industry that you've seen, at least with the, the utilities you work with and other asset intensive industries?
Yes. So I think sometimes when I see these organizations that are still dependent on spreadsheets, they really want to digitize and they want to modernize the systems they're using, but they always think that they don't have time. Well, maybe in a couple of years, I'll do this. And next year they'll say, maybe in a couple of years, I'll do this. So it seems like if they never get to it, if they keep putting it on the back burner, they're never going to get there, and that's how, unfortunately, that's how they are where they are today, is because they keep delaying their infrastructure and their technology investments. So I think that, the way I had demonstrated how you have to prioritize what you do, you have to set aside some time and budgets for innovation that's going to help you in the long run. If you do the payback period and when you're doing your long-term planning, you're looking at how much it costs you, not just how much money you have to spend to implement something, but how much it actually is costing you. You will be able to make that decision a lot quicker, I think. So some of the hurdles relate to change management, and most of the hurdle, I think, relates to people who say, well, I don't have a lot of time, or my people have been doing this for 20 years. They don't want to change, but you have to think about your long-term survival of your organization when these people who've been there 30 years retire, right? So you really have to be getting ahead of that. So
yeah.
With the
like getting where you are today is not going to get you to the future, or something to that. Right. Butchered that expression. But Laura, what about you? What do you think in terms of some of the roadblocks, the hurdles for folks in the industry?
I agree with Christy for sure. You have to not only get a system in place, but you have to take the time to learn it, adopt it, train people on it, make them feel comfortable. And I think there are some systems that are easier than others. And so the easier you can make it feel like tools that people use on a regular basis, the better. That's why we went with the Microsoft platform. We know people use Microsoft tools like Outlook, Excel, Word, certainly Excel, Word, on a regular basis. So that was part of our strategy with VPO, is to use something that's very familiar to people so that they don't have to spend 3 days in a training course either learning it. It's just intuitive and they just pick it up. They get some guidance up front, but they can just pick up and run with it.
Yeah, I would add to that,
Oh, go
Laura,
ahead.
if I may. Along those lines, I think in addition to the look and feel of our tools, which are Microsoft based, I think another thing that we have in common is that we use the customer's terminology.
Mhm.
Very easy. When they log into the system, they're seeing their terminology. They don't have to interpret, what something means they're seeing on the screen, because
Mhm.
it's something they've been seeing on the spreadsheets for the last 10 years. It's the same thing. So the training is very short. People always ask me, how long does it, how long do you have to train people? I said, for people who entered the data, like an hour,
Right.
it's not like days of training, because they know what it means already. We just have to teach them to click here and there.
Yeah.
They already know what it means. There's no translation. It's not like some of the other SaaS products that you see in the market. You have to use their terminology, right?
Right.
But in our case, we use the customer's terminology. And I think that overcomes one of the biggest hurdles.
That's
Yeah.
very good point.
Yeah, that configurability enables you to speak their language at the end of the day, which I think, to your point, is a hurdle to adoption. So with that in mind, and knowing that we're kind of approaching the top of the hour, so how do we get people to move quicker, to this digital transformation, this digitization, if you will? Especially given the $1 trillion that is going to be spent on infrastructure projects, which is going to affect a lot of folks on the call. Laura, what are your thoughts on that? What's a way we can speed adoption?
Why don't you go, Christy? Because I messed up on the slide, so I'm trying to get this one back.
How do we speed adoption? So I think we touched on, like, if the training is easy, right? That makes it, that would speed the adoption. I think it's kind of a chicken or the egg. I think they have to adopt a tool like, the ones that we talked about today, so that they could be they have projects that are shovel ready, when the influx of money is available to them. So in the utilities that we work with, especially like in the water or some other, they establish a budget for the year, and they want to come in as close to that budget as possible, like on the penny, because they don't want to go over, but they want to spend every penny they can get in their budget. So it's very important that they make the right decisions for projects that are shovel ready. And if there is extra money, extra budget, they want to make sure that there are design projects they can work on now, so that next year they'll be shovel ready. So I think it's important to look ahead, so that they can take advantage of this influx of money.
And on my end, once they've decided what projects they're going to do this next year, we need to make it easy as possible to get that into the system as quickly as possible, because a lot of our asset intensive customers, they'll approve like 400 projects in one day. So we need to take that information and then initiate all the project sites within VPO so that they're ready, up and running and ready for them to start using it automatically.
Right. Well, with that, we are bumping up against the top of the hour. I want to thank you, Laura and Christy, so much for your time today, but especially the folks that joined. And for those that did join, we're going to make the slides available to you. And again, we'll address any questions on a one-on-one basis as well. Okay. Thanks very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Laura and Guy. Thanks, Daisy.